The bell chimed, a soft sound in the air. But the moment Karen Dinkle stepped into the showroom, everything changed. She didn't walk in like a customer. She walked in like she owned the place, demanding the Ferrari SF90. For 6 months, no questions asked. But this wasn't a car rental. This was my world, where rules mattered. I told her no, and that's when the storm started. What I didn't expect. The documents she'd send next weren't just fake. They were dangerous. I could already see her trying to spin her way out of this, but there was one thing she didn't count on. I was ready. Karen Dinkle wasn't the type of person who walked into a room. She stormed it. The moment she entered, the showroom shifted. It wasn't the polite smile she wore or the sharpness in her tone. It was the way she carried herself, like the entire place existed to serve her, not the other way around. Her fingers pointed at the red Ferrari SF90, and she didn't ask. She demanded, "That one, delivered tomorrow." No questions, no paperwork, just entitlement wrapped in a designer blazer. I wasn't fazed by her presence. I'd dealt with people like her before. But Karen? She was something else. She wasn't here for the car. She was here for control. She saw my showroom as a challenge, my policies as something to break, and she didn't care who got in her way. The moment I told her she couldn't skip steps, that's when the game began. This wasn't just about a car. It was about her need to prove that nothing, not even rules, could stop her. Little did she know I wasn't going to bend, and I was already a step ahead, waiting for her next move. I'd been in the Ferrari business long enough to know that luxury cars weren't just about performance. They were about passion. Every person who walked into the showroom was searching for more than a machine. They were chasing an experience. And, as a salesman at Prestige Ferrari of Scottsdale, it was my job to ensure that experience was perfect. The showroom was my domain, a calm, almost sacred place where the soft hum of the air conditioning and the polished concrete floors reflected the shine of the Ferrari SF90 in the center. Everything had its place. I wasn't just any salesman. I knew these cars inside and out, every detail, every curve. I respected the power they held, the responsibility that came with them, because driving a Ferrari wasn't like driving any other car. It was a privilege, not a right. And I made sure every potential client knew it. It wasn't just about credit scores or paperwork. It was about proving you were worthy of that kind of power. For the most part, people understood that. They knew the process, respected it. But not Karen Dinkle. She didn't walk in like a customer. She walked in like a conqueror. From the moment she pointed at the SF90, I could feel the tension in the air. There was something about her, her posture, the way she dismissed everything I said, the way she demanded, that rubbed me the wrong way. It was clear she didn't respect the rules. She didn't see them as safeguards. She saw them as barriers to break. But what bothered me most wasn't her arrogance. It was the way she treated others like tools to be used and discarded. She had that "I'm above this" look, the kind that told me this was more than just about leasing a car. This was about her wanting to prove she could do whatever she wanted, whenever she wanted. I knew I had to stop her, not just for the integrity of the dealership, but for the safety of everyone else who would be on the road with her. If she couldn't follow the rules for a lease, what else was she capable of? It started small, like any battle of wills. Karen kept pushing for her terms, trying to convince me that a quick 6-month lease was just a formality. "It's just paperwork," she said dismissively, as if my years of experience in the business meant nothing. But this wasn't just a lease. It was a 1,000 horsepower Ferrari, a machine that could change lives, for better or worse. Still, I kept my cool. I explained the process again: standard credit check, insurance verification, and driver's training. "We've been through this already," I said. She scoffed. But there was something in her eyes, that stubborn gleam, that told me this wasn't about a car. She was testing my boundaries, probing to see how far she could push. Her attitude began to rub me the wrong way. I noticed her parking too close to the showroom windows, lingering outside the dealership with her arms crossed, like she was watching me. I shrugged it off. Maybe she was waiting for the perfect moment to strike, but I wasn't going to let her rattle me. Still, the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. A few days later, she called in, asking for an update on the lease. I told her I hadn't received her documents yet, and that she'd need to submit a complete insurance binder before we could move forward. It wasn't personal, it was policy. The phone call was polite at first, but her tone quickly shifted. "I've already sent everything over," she snapped, her patience running thin. "What's taking so long?" The next morning I received an email from her with the subject line, SF90 lease, paperwork attached. I opened it, expecting the usual insurance binder, but instead found a document that looked off. It was from one of the insurance companies we worked with, but the logo was fuzzy and pixelated. The policy number? A string of numbers that looked more like an afterthought than a legitimate entry. I stared at the screen for a moment, trying to process what I was seeing. This wasn't just incomplete paperwork. It was a forged document. The kind of thing you expect from a scam artist, not someone in her position. But Karen wasn't done. She was already preparing for the next move. I wasn't going to let this go. I pulled out my own binder from a legitimate client to compare the two. It didn't take long to see the glaring difference. The logo on her insurance binder was blurry, a poorly scanned copy. The font was wrong. The policy number? A joke. I called Robert, our finance lead, and we sat down to analyze the document together. The longer we looked at it, the clearer it became. Karen Dinkle had submitted a forged insurance document in an attempt to bypass the necessary checks for the SF90. This wasn't just a simple mistake. It was fraud. By now, I could feel the pressure building. I'd put myself in a position to confront her, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was playing me. The situation escalated faster than I anticipated. My phone buzzed, and it was the dealership's insurance provider calling. "Jake," the agent on the other end said. "We've flagged the binder Karen submitted. It's a fake." The situation had gone from a paperwork issue to something more serious. I realized that if Karen would lie about something as small as insurance, she'd probably lie about anything. This wasn't just about the Ferrari anymore. It was about a pattern of deceit. I wasn't about to let her get away with this. I contacted the insurance company's fraud division, and they confirmed what I already knew. The documents were fake. With that, I called Coach Diaz, our track partner, and warned him to expect Karen. She was going to show up with her own version of a training certificate, and I needed to be prepared to shut it down. It wasn't long before Karen appeared at the track. Dressed in a designer tracksuit, she walked in like she owned the place, claiming to have completed an online preliminary course. But when Coach Diaz checked his list, Karen wasn't there. She demanded to speak to him, but he remained firm. "You're not on my list, Miss Dinkle. I'm sorry, but you're not getting on this track." That's when the game changed. Karen's face turned red, and she started shouting about how she was the president of the Pine Ridge HOA, demanding special treatment. Her voice cracked with frustration, but Coach Diaz didn't flinch. He was as unmovable as a brick wall. When she waved her fake certificate in his face, he didn't even glance at it. He simply told her to leave, or he'd have security escort her out. For a moment, it looked like Karen might lose control, but she just sputtered in disbelief, unable to understand why people weren't folding in front of her. Her anger was starting to show, but this was far from over. Karen wasn't going to back down. She called the dealership the next day, claiming discrimination and threatening to go to the media. She'd whipped up a storm, but I was prepared. I had all the evidence in place. I called my boss, Mr. Chen, and laid out the facts. Karen had submitted a forged insurance binder, a fake certificate, and had tried to use her HOA status to intimidate everyone involved. I told him she was walking into a trap she didn't even know was set. The media storm she was trying to create was a desperate move, but it wasn't going to work. I wasn't going to let her use her position to escape the consequences. I offered a solution. One supervised track day with our dealer-owned Ferrari, no exceptions. If she couldn't handle it, it was over. She took the bait. I was ready for her, and I had a feeling it was going to be the worst driving I'd ever seen. The Arizona sun beat down on the track, turning the asphalt into a slick mirror of heat. Karen arrived with her usual sense of entitlement, smug and self-assured, wearing that same designer tracksuit, as though she were about to conquer the track. I wasn't concerned about her driving skills. After all, I'd already seen the signs. This was about proving that she wasn't above the rules. The dealership's demo SF90 was waiting for her, parked at the pit lane, ready for a test she didn't even realize she couldn't pass. Coach Diaz and I walked her through the basics, and she brushed it all off with a roll of her eyes. Her arrogance was palpable, like she didn't need instructions. She was the one who'd told us all how great she was. But we weren't here for showmanship. We were here to test if she could follow simple instructions and handle the Ferrari without endangering herself or anyone else. Her smug grin didn't reach her eyes. She was more interested in checking her reflection in the window than listening to my briefing. "Karen, remember," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Follow the directions. This is about the safety of everyone on the road, including you." She waved me off. "I've got this." Coach Diaz's voice crackled through the radio. "Radio check, Karen." "Fine," she snapped, not even bothering to make eye contact. "Check." It was time. The pit crew waved the green flag and Karen floored it. The SF-90 shot down the straight, the roar of the engine so loud I could feel it in my chest. My hand instinctively hovered over the emergency cutoff switch. She wasn't listening to a single thing we'd said. As we approached the first turn, I shouted over the engine, "Brakes now, Karen!" Nothing. She kept her foot on the accelerator. The car began to lurch as the speedometer climbed, and I could feel the tension in my gut. We were heading straight for the first corner. She didn't brake. The car bucked, and I reached for the kill switch. At the last second, she slammed on the brakes and kept her foot on the gas. The car's anti-lock brakes kicked in, screeching and pulsing, fighting against her. We squealed through the turn, narrowly avoiding disaster. My hands gripped the sides of my seat, my knuckles white. We were this close to losing control. The rest of the lap didn't improve. She ignored every command from Coach Diaz, flying through corners without braking, accelerating past a yellow flag, completely ignoring the red lights and safety markers. She was sawing at the wheel, out of control, as if she thought the car would just obey her. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It wasn't just bad, it was reckless. She was a danger to everyone on that track. Every telemetry printout from the car would confirm it. An utter disregard for safety, the most basic skills of driving a high-performance car, and a complete lack of understanding about the responsibilities that came with it. The lap finally ended. I was drenched in cold sweat. My pulse was racing. But Karen? She stepped out of the car, beaming with a grin that was nothing short of smug. "See? I handled it," she said, brushing off her tracksuit. "What a car." I couldn't hold back anymore. "You almost killed us," I said quietly, my voice steady, but the anger was there. "You can't drive like that. You ignored every command, every warning. You were dangerous." But Karen wasn't listening. She didn't see what I saw. In her mind, the fact that we didn't crash meant she'd won. She hadn't even grasped the severity of what she'd done. She looked at the telemetry printout Coach Diaz was holding and shook her head, waving it off. "This is all just a trick to make me look bad," she muttered. "You're just trying to cover up your mistake." I reached for my phone, knowing what I had to do. "Karen, this is what you did," I said, holding it up. "I recorded the entire lap. The data's in the system. It doesn't lie." Karen's eyes widened when she saw the data. The sharp, jagged lines on the printout painted the picture. Full throttle and 80% brake at the same time, accelerating past a yellow flag. There was no denying it now. The truth hit her like a brick wall, but instead of admitting defeat, she reached for her phone, her fingers shaking in anger. She went live on social media, her voice trembling with fake tears. "I'm being attacked!" she cried into the camera, her face contorted into an expression of feigned victimhood. "This is sexism. They're trying to ruin me because I'm a woman. They made me drive a defective car and now they're trying to blame me for it." The room fell silent as she ranted. But I wasn't worried. This wasn't a battle of emotions. It was a battle of facts. While Karen raged on her social media, I was already preparing my response. It wasn't about defending myself. It was about exposing her. Coach Diaz and I were silent, letting her do all the talking. Once she was done, I called my finance guy, Robert, who had been watching from the sidelines. He nodded. "Let's shut this down." The storm Karen had tried to stir up had already begun to fade. Her live stream was quickly buried under an avalanche of facts and truth. Tessa's video had gone viral in the local Scottsdale community, and the feedback was overwhelming. Comments flooded in, and the once sympathetic voices began to turn against her. People saw through her act. The woman who had painted herself as the victim was now exposed as nothing more than a fraud. The community's reaction was swift. The same people who had once feared her, or at least had tolerated her behavior as HOA president, were now rallying together. The support for the dealership was palpable. Even those who had once kept quiet at HOA meetings began to speak up, sharing their experiences of Karen's heavy-handed tactics and manipulative ways. She had tried to use her position of power to shield herself from the consequences of her actions, but now the truth had a louder voice. At the dealership, the mood shifted too. I'd seen enough to know that no one ever really likes to confront a bully, especially one that holds sway in a community. But once Karen's behavior was laid bare, everyone began to breathe easier. We weren't just selling cars anymore. We were standing up for fairness, for doing the right thing, even when it wasn't the easiest option. It wasn't long before the insurance company came back to me with the official fraud statement. The documents were undeniable. Karen had forged the insurance binder, creating a dangerous situation not just for herself, but for everyone she came in contact with. I forwarded that letter to my boss, Mr. Chen, who immediately took action. The dealership's legal team had already been on standby, prepared for a media battle. They got to work fast, ensuring all the documentation was in place to protect the dealership and the brand. But it wasn't just about us anymore. Karen's actions had consequences beyond the showroom. The fraud she committed was a felony, one that could lead to criminal charges. I didn't have to get involved in the legal side, that was up to the authorities. But I made sure to keep a copy of every document, every piece of evidence. It was clear. Karen would face the legal consequences of her actions, and it would be impossible for her to escape them. And then, the final blow to her reign as HOA president came. The community, armed with the evidence they had gathered and the help of Hunter and his team, demanded an emergency meeting. At the meeting, everything came out. The fraudulent charges, the misuse of HOA funds, the manipulated contracts, and Karen's self-dealing with landscaping companies. It didn't take long for the room to turn against her. The neighbors who had once been afraid to challenge her were now emboldened. Karen's threats had no weight behind them. Her tenure as president came to a swift, decisive end. The meeting concluded with the removal of Karen Dinkle from her position as president. A motion to oust her passed with overwhelming support, and within minutes, her hold over Pine Ridge was shattered. Karen's face went pale as she stood there, staring at the crowd, her world crumbling in real time. She had been a queen in her mind, but now she was nothing more than a disgraced former president. I didn't attend the meeting, but I didn't need to. I could feel the weight of the community's relief from a distance. It was palpable. The tension that had gripped Pine Ridge for so long was finally gone. I'd had my own role in making sure she didn't just get away with it, but it wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, about ensuring that power was never again misused to intimidate and control. In the weeks that followed, the transformation in Pine Ridge was undeniable. The HOA began functioning the way it was meant to, with transparency, accountability, and a focus on the community's well-being. The funds were redirected to fix the pool pump, maintain the landscaping, and address long-standing issues that had been ignored under Karen's rule. The neighborhood that had been fractured by her deceit began to heal. Neighbors who had once kept to themselves now found common ground in their shared experiences. There were no more secret meetings, no more underhanded deals. People spoke up, and they were heard. The community felt like a community again. I received a postcard from Tessa a few weeks later. The front featured a picture of her Portofino, parked next to a stunning stretch of coastline, the ocean in the background. On the back she wrote, "Thanks for keeping the road safe. Rules rock." It made me smile. She understood. She wasn't just a customer. She was a real car enthusiast who respected the process, who appreciated the value of rules and safety. As for Karen, she still tried to stir the pot from time to time, posting angry rants and threats online. But it didn't matter anymore. Her followers dwindled as the truth about her spread. The community knew exactly who she was now. I sat back in my office one afternoon, looking out at the showroom floor. The Ferrari SF90 gleamed under the lights. It was a reminder that some things, no matter how powerful, can't be bent or broken. The rules were what kept everyone safe. Whether you were driving a Ferrari or just trying to live your life in a peaceful neighborhood. The showroom was calm again. The bell chimed as a customer walked in. I smiled, ready to do my job again. No shortcuts, no exceptions. Just a fair start for everyone.